Each year, hundreds of people are reported missing in our parks and forests. Most are eventually found, but there's a smaller category of cases that never get solved. The I-Team's George Knapp is here with the story. George.
It's not a revelation to say that people get lost out in the wilderness or in forest areas. We're talking about a different kind of mystery, though. Disappearances that are not caused by predator attacks or criminals hiding out there in the woods or just bad luck. A former cop has put together hundreds of case files regarding clusters of missing persons in national parks where the circumstances are flat out strange. But don't expect any answers from the Park Service.
People disappear in the wild all the time, and we're talking about something different. These were unusual things that don't make sense that happen to cluster together in 3 to 4, sometimes as many as 20, 30 people missing at one location.
We began putting his own list together and discovered what appears to be nearly 30 clusters of disappearances in national parks and forests, cases which meet a narrow set of odd characteristics. The people who vanish often do so right under the noses of others. The missing defy logic. They hike uphill, for instance, often steep climbs. Children as young as 2 or 3 are found a day or two later many miles away and over mountain range. Weird things happen to their clothing. The missing often shed their clothes right away, even in bad weather. Clothes are found sometimes neatly folded, but not the people. The missing defy normal search and rescue practices. Bodies are found in places that are all but inaccessible, or they're found in the open, in areas that were repeatedly searched earlier. Bloodhounds or other tracker dogs are often befuddled. Other aspects of this mystery are even more bizarre, though difficult to explain in just a couple of minutes. Example, many of the vanished who are found alive are kids too young to speak, or kids who can't communicate because of disabilities. Some who are found alive say they can't remember what happened to them.
Each year, hundreds.
Hey everybody, welcome to Do You Believe on Paranormal Zone TV. Thanks everyone so much for being here tonight, and I want to wish you all a happy new year. And this is another year, 2016, of paranormal live broadcasting. Tonight, I'm really excited about the show we're going to present to you. And my guests are Dave Spinks and Dave Spinks and David Weatherly. Now, Dave Spinks is with CRPI Investigations. He is the owner and creator. He also has a YouTube channel, and he has a website as well. And I'm showing Dave. I'm showing your information now on the YouTube, and also I have David Weatherly. David Weatherly is a writer. He is an explorer, and he's an investigator of the strange. He also has written 2 books, Black-Eyed Children and Strange Intruders. And I will have David back on my show to renew the Black-Eyed Children. And I've never had him on the show yet for his new book, Strange Intruders. And he does have a 3rd book coming out. And maybe David will tell us about that as well. His website is Two Crows Paranormal at blogspot.com. So everybody, with that, let's welcome to the show Dave and David.
Hey guys, hey Noreen.
Hey Noreen, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and thank you for joining me tonight on the show for this fabulous topic. I've always been interested in the vanishings and the disappearances and how strange all this comes about. And now tonight we have several cases we're going to talk about. And then after we've talked about the cases, we're going to talk about, Dave and David, we're going to talk about possible theories as to how this is happening or possibly why. With that, but let me just say a little bit something about these disappearances. Each year, hundreds of people are reported missing in national parks and forests, and some are eventually found. Most of those who have disappeared are children, ages 20 months to 12 years, and the elderly, ages 74 to 85. Typically, a search is initiated for about 10 days, and then they stop looking for the person. Children and adults and elderly who disappeared, sometimes in the presence of friends. I've read stories where a family will be with their child, their little 3-year-old, walking alongside of them, and they look down and the child it's gone, completely vanished. Also, there in the research that I've done, I've listened to many YouTube videos on this information, and I also have read up on this, and there are 28 clusters, and I'll show you the map. This was taken from this information I've received from David Pilates, and this is a map they have on their website, and it's those clusters all over the United States where people have been disappearing, and this dates way back to the 1800s. So tonight we have, like I said, we have several cases we're going to talk about. And Dave, do you want to start with one of your cases?
Sure.
And actually, what I thought, maybe would you like to start with Dennis Martin?
Sure. Yeah.
Go ahead.
We'll start with a case of a 6-year-old boy that stems back from 1969, and I've come across this case throughout my years in the paranormal because there's a paranormal tie, if you will, to this case, and I'll tell you about that in a little ways into the story. Back in '69, there was a little 6-year-old boy named Dennis Martin who traveled to the Great Smoky Mountains with his family, his grandfather, his brother, and his dad, and another family that had some young boys as well. And this was like a yearly thing for them. And around 4:30 in the afternoon on June 14th, the group was in a grassy area known as Spence Field, and that's right on the Tennessee-North Carolina border. And the boys decided they were on a trail there, and they decided they were going to break up into two groups and sneak around the older men and jump out and scare them. Well, the boys went around and did their thing, and they all jumped out and scared them, and then they all laughed and had like a good time and everything. And this is all from reports from the family. And when they realized, they looked around and Dennis was just gone, and they couldn't figure out, they were just there. Within 2 minutes, they went around the trail in the bushes, jumped out, scared everybody, they had a good time, and then he was vanished. So within 3 to 5 minutes, they went frantic and started searching for him. Couldn't find him anywhere at first. And long story short, they went off and got help, and this investigation blew up into this huge thing. They ended up having 1,400 searchers out looking for this boy. And the only thing they found was they found a shoe and a footprint. The shoe was of the type he was wearing, and later on, as the police got involved in everything, what was really compelling to me is they had a whole squad of Green Berets come in and help. And that usually doesn't happen very often, guys. And as they got, further along into the search, they got a witness report of hearing what they described as a young boy screaming in agony or like scared to death type of scream. And the witnesses described as seeing what looked like a hairy man with a young boy on its shoulders making its way off into the woods.
Oh my God.
So that's the paranormal aspect of it for me, because, everybody knows what that describes, either a Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it. But there was no trace ever found of this young boy. And unfortunately, during the search, it came one of the worst downpours for days on end there, and the streams were flooded out. So whatever there would have been of evidence of footprints and whatnot was washed away. They searched for many, many days for this young boy. And, bottom line is they never found him, and it's still a mystery 45 years later.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about that retired ranger, Dwight McCarter?
Yeah, he is very, this case actually set the standard on how they search for victims of missing people now. He thought that there was way too many people in the area. They were trampling on evidence and whatnot, and it was this huge controversy and everything. And, you know, you can go either way with that. They had dogs in there, everything. There was just no trail because the rain washed it away. You know, so the guy is like one of the most well-known trackers there is, you know, in the country, and he couldn't find him. And, you know, he said one of the things I thought interesting is they look for downed airplanes and walk within 10 feet of one, but the growth of the forest will swallow those things up eventually, you know, and then the sediment and everything else covers up bones and whatever it could be. But they've never found a trace of this young boy other than what was initially found.
Oh, my God.
I just thought it was really compelling that witnesses described what they call an unkempt, hairy man with what looked like a young boy on his shoulder going away from the scene, and they heard the scream. So, you know, that's one theory.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that after we've talked about all the cases, because I'm curious about these men that live in the wild. And I think we had talked about that couple of days ago. So let's finish. I'll finish all the cases, and then we'll talk about what you guys think and your possible theories on this. All right. So now my case I'm going to talk about is Jared Adadero, 3 years old, and he disappeared October 2nd in 1999 in the Comanche Peak Wilderness of northern Colorado. He was a dark-haired and dimpled little 3-year-old, and he was with his sister Jocelyn. Now, the father had given them permission to hike with this group of Christians, but they never told them, the father, Alan Adadero, that the location that they were going into, which was a pretty rugged location, and it was near the Poudre River, the state hatchery. And this area is enshrouded in mystery and has been for over the years by miners and Indians. He was one of 3 boys actually that have actually disappeared in a larger 138 square triangle of this area. This is one of the clusters.
Wow.
Jared was walking along, and the strange thing is, here's a trail that this 3-year-old started walking up, and he's only 3 years old. And this is a steep, complicated, high trail for this little 3-year-old to walk up there by himself. Now, in his trek up to these mountains, he had come across 2 fishermen that were by the river. And he had asked these 2 fishermen, are there any bears up here? And they told him, I guess they told him no. And so he continued on. Now, these 2 fishermen were the last ones to see him alive. And this little fella, he continued on, and I'll show you the steep ridge that he had to climb up. Now, his body was found, not his body, but remains of him was found at the top of this ridge, which was 9,125 feet. It was 550 feet above where Jared had disappeared. The search and rescue team had found, this was his resting place. I'll show you the top of the ridge. They found a tooth. A tooth was found in this area, and they also found his pants that were inside out, and they found his sweatshirt. They also found his shoes. Now, the strange thing about his shoes, now all these objects weren't found until 4 years after he had disappeared. And the condition of his shoes, they were almost like brand new. And these shoes were exposed to nature and the winds and the snow in this area, but yet his shoes still showed no signs of wear, which is really odd for this to happen. His shirt was never found, and it was said that the climb was the trek up to this hill, this mountain, there's no way that this little boy could have done it himself. So how the heck did Jared get up there? So that will be one of our theories on this case that we'll be talking about after we discuss all the cases. Okay, Dave, do you want to, let's see. Now, why don't we go to, let me find Claudette. David Weatherly. Let's do Claudette.
Yeah, sure. Well, you guys are talking about domestic cases, and as a lot of you know, I've done a lot of research overseas, and like Dave was talking about, I'm very fascinated with the paranormal aspects of some of these disappearances and weird cases. And this particular one I find very fascinating. It's from France. They did find this woman, but the case itself is really bizarre. This starts out from 1978, and it's southern France. A young woman named Claudette is out for a tour of her family's farmlands. Now, she takes a horse. She's riding a horse. She takes an extra horse with her, and she has her dog who never leaves her side. She is planning on being gone for 2 days. 3 days later, she still hasn't returned. Her mother calls on neighbors to put up a search party. So they gather about 30 people. They begin to search for this woman across the farmland. And the next day, they find the horse that she was riding. However, this horse is dead, and the reports say that it was, quote, savagely ripped open. But they couldn't determine what had attacked the horse. There was no sign of Claudette, so they continued the search. Another day passes, and the search team discovers Claudette's spare horse. Now, this horse is alive, but it's been traumatized, just barely able to walk. And at this point, the search team says that, we better call the authorities. So they call in the French authorities, who launch a search. They broaden the area that they're searching in, and it takes another week before a clue is found. Now, this is what is described as a burned out glade, and scattered around this glade are some of Claudette's clothing, articles of clothing. This is 100 miles from where she disappeared, from where she departed. Now, that's a long distance for someone, traveling just on foot at this point. There's no sign of her other than the clothing. They continue their search. 2 days later, a police station receives a phone call about a strange girl in the town of Rodez. Now, authorities, they send officers out to check on this woman. They find this woman sitting on the ground. She has a dog by her side. The woman is covered in mud, and she's unable to speak. The dog, what was wrong with her? They described her state as near zombie-like. She was, making strange motions. She either couldn't or wouldn't speak at all. And the authorities themselves were very disturbed by this case. In fact, there's a quote here I'll read you from the police commissioner at the time, who says, quote, "We have no idea what happened to her or her horse, but something mysterious went on out there. The wounds on the dead horse were horrific, but it was not attacked by an animal. There are no claw or bite marks. We do not have an explanation for the burned out glade where we found some of her clothing." So, this mystery, we've got the animal element. We've got one horse that's been mutilated and killed. We've got another horse and a dog who are incredibly traumatized by some kind of experience. And we've got a young woman who is so traumatized that she doesn't speak again. I've attempted to do some follow-ups on this case. There's very scant amount of information. As you can understand, the family pretty much, tried to keep this quiet in the aftermath. But after she was hospitalized, I don't find any record of her ever speaking about the incident since that time. And it remains an unsolved mystery.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's pretty creepy. The next case. Let's see, what's the next one, Dave?
Stacy Eris.
How about can you do Ambrose Pierce, the journalist, on Orion Williamson?
Yeah, I guess. Hold on a second. I didn't look at. I know a little bit about Ambrose, where he, wrote the story about him and stuff, and then he disappeared himself. But I'll tell about Orion first. This is a crazy case, man. I came across this when Noreen asked us to do the show, and I was like, man, this, it didn't happen in the National Forest or anything, but the story goes is this farmer named Orion Williamson from Selma, Alabama, in 1854 simply vanished into thin air while walking across his property. So his family and some other folks that were on a horse and buggy right there next to his field saw him walking across his property, and he just like magic, bam, poof, he's gone. And what's really cool about this and really strange, all these people saw it happen, and they immediately jumped off the horse and buggies, ran over there to where he was, and started, wiping away the whatever the agriculture was, corner, it's probably not even corn, it's probably cotton down there. But looking for him, there was no holes in the ground, there was no sign of him anywhere, and he just simply vanished. And they had newspaper reporters come from all over because everyone was running. They didn't know what to make of this, and they did all kinds of stories on it. And the Ambrose guy did a story on it and stuff, and then later on he was one of the most famous people. He simply disappeared without a trace himself as well. What's really weird, there was this guy that's a German scientist that was involved in these there's been more of these type of disappearances where folks just vanished into thin air in front of other people. And his name was Dr. Maximilian Hearn. And he wrote a book called, Disappearances and Theory Thereof. And his theory surrounding what he called spots of universal ether. And it's really hard to explain this, but I'll try to explain it in the simplest terms I can. Like, he said he believed that this universal ether could destroy solid objects that happened to be inside them. So it was like some kind of portal, if you will, or doorway to another dimension. And if you happen to be unlucky enough to go into one, you would not be seen, or you could not see. You were just in this, like a ball, and you were gone, and no one could ever find you, and you couldn't find your way out, and you just died in there. So it was really, really creepy thing. And the way they explain that, in one of these articles I was looking into, it was just amazing. And this Dr. Maximilian Hearn, who had this whole theory on this, and there's numerous cases of this happening to folks. So, if you want to learn more about it, look it up, and it'll explain more in detail about his theories and what he thought was going on with these people just up and poof, disappearing right in front of people's eyes.
That's crazy.
Now, I should add in here, there are a lot of people that think the Orion Williamson story is a hoax. And there's a similar story that surfaced afterwards about a man named David Lang. It's the same kind of disappearance that Dave was speaking about. And, we get into an area, this is early 1900s, and we get into a period where there's this weird blend of fact and fiction being reported in newspapers. And, there's a lot of bits of folklore that get added into a lot of these legends and so forth. So it really, we get into some murky territory when we go back to some of these older cases trying to fit all the pieces together. I know one of the arguments against the Orion Williamson case being genuine is that they've had trouble finding him in census records and so forth. But, at the same time, as Dave and I found doing historical research, you can't always depend on that because, something cannot be in a dozen records, and then all of a sudden you find some record that, wow, there it is. Yeah, this proves that person exists. So it's an intriguing case, and it's one of those that I think is kind of open-ended. We're not sure whether it's genuine or what the root of it is.
Well, like the case on that Claudette, David, I could not get the information on that is almost impossible to get any information on that case. And pictures,
right.
Forget about the pictures.
Oh yeah, there are no pictures, and that's of course it's the 1970s, so it's pre-internet, and you've also got a period where the family was purportedly well off at the time. So with a situation like that, they're going to do everything they can to suppress this being in the media when something like that happens, because it's kind of seen as a blight on the family. And they don't want to talk. They don't want people talking about it and posting information. So in newspapers or anything else. So yeah, the information on that is very, very scant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in those early 1900 cases too, spiritualism and stuff was making this huge thing around that time. People were doing the spirit photography, and they were doing seances and all kinds of things. So. And then some other folks that just didn't refuse to talk about anything like that because, being with their religious backgrounds and stuff, that was hoodoo. No, you don't talk about that stuff. So a lot of those records are gone because of that, I'm sure.
Okay, Dave, do you want to talk about Stacy Eris now?
Sure. This case is a well-known case. It happened back in '81 in Yosemite, what the whole thing started when this young girl, Stacy Eris, 14 years old, decided to go. They went on a family outing on horseback with her father and like 7 other people, and they went pretty much kind of out in the back country, like several miles out, 6, 7, 8 miles out, and they came to a small group of cabins where they were going to, stay and do their thing. And when they got to the cabins, they all got off the horses and they went in and cleaned up a little bit. And Stacy came out and told her dad that she was going to take some pictures. And there was a 71-year-old man with them who was sitting on this big rock outcropping, looking out over the lake and everything. And she said, Dad, I'm going to go over there and take some pictures with him. And she did that, and everybody saw her go over there. And then she took a few pictures, and then she decided she was going to go down away from the old man, like 100 yards into this group of trees. And she went down there. Everybody saw her go down there. It wasn't like, when the old man didn't do anything to her or anything. Everybody saw her leave and walk away. And that was the last time she was ever seen. And they went over there, a big search happened, started looking for her and everything, couldn't find her. The only thing they found was her lens to her camera, and she was never seen from again. And that is just, how does someone disappear out into thin air like that? That blows my mind, right there 100 yards away within eye shot, and bam, never seen again. That's just crazy.
I know.
Just, we can get into some of the theories that could possibly cause that, but, we'll talk about that later in the show. But that's the simple of it. She just disappeared.
That is so crazy. All these cases are insane.
They were about 9,000 or 10,000 feet up in elevation in the mountains there too, and so it was another high altitude area.
Yeah, and that seems to be a lot of these cases when they go into these national parks, Dave, where they're in a high altitude, a high elevation. Yeah.
One thing too that I'll mention on that case too is, after a certain amount of time, a short amount of time, like a month or so, the case kind of died out, which so many of these cases do, and there was nothing really happening on the case, even though it's still an open case for 25 or 30 years, and the Park Service will not talk about it. They won't release any information because it's still an open case, and it's sad. It's sad that they may have information that the family could use or other law enforcement agencies could use to maybe gain some insight on it, but they will not release anything on it.
No, that's what I understand. They will not release any information on these cases, and I don't know why. Maybe they don't want to scare people from going into the national forest. I don't know.
Well, that's a possibility,
David Weatherly, you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay. We lost your video, but you want to talk about the other disappearance that you have on Mary Boyle?
Yeah, sure.
And
it has some similarities to what Dave was just talking about. You should have video up on me, yeah?
No, not yet.
Okay.
How old was this little girl?
Mary Boyle was 6 years old.
Okay.
And this is Ireland's youngest missing person, and one of the country's oldest unsolved mysteries. It is there's something very disturbing about this case. Now, I've been on the site. Barry Fitzgerald and I did some work looking at this case because of some of the strange paranormal possibilities that exist. But let me give you the short version of this. March 1977, and this is in County Donegal. 6-year-old Mary Boyle is walking down a dirt lane towards her home. Her uncle passed her by. He was carrying a ladder and was going to do some work. This is a piece of farmland, and along this dirt lane, in sight of the home and numerous people, she just disappeared. She just suddenly wasn't there. And this has been a case that has taken so many strange twists and turns. It's, as I said, it was 1977, so this is an old case. And Ireland, it's not like the United States. They don't have huge backlogs of unsolved cases like this. At one point, there was a gentleman who was a serial pedophile out of the UK who they thought was responsible because he had been in the region. But it was later proven pretty conclusively that he did not do this. And when you go to the site, a lot of people want to argue that this was some random abduction, that a stranger was driving by and snatched this little girl. No. When you drive to this site, this is Irish countryside. You're not going to be passing by this farm unless you're going back to that farm. And, it's not an easily accessible area. When you do go back there, the people in the neighborhood see you coming. It's a really bizarre thing. Over the years, psychics have come in on the case and, at various times have said, she's in this lock or she's here. And no one has ever been able to determine exactly what happened to this girl. She had a twin sister. And one of the things that happened that is not really talked about much, I don't know if it's even been published anywhere, but at one point after the disappearance, they had her twin sister walk the same route that Mary had taken. And at one point, she got approximately to the spot where they thought she had vanished. And her twin sister just kind of stopped and sort of swayed for a few minutes, almost like she was in a trance. And, then snapped out of it and continued on.
That's strange.
So it's it's a very bizarre case. It's there's something. Yeah, I find most of Ireland pretty magical anyway, but there's something about that particular area in Donegal. You get a very unsettled feeling, and Dave will know what I'm talking about because some of the areas we go into as investigators, you just get this feeling you can't shake that something is not quite right in this location. Some arguments can be made that this is possibly simply a murder case, and if that's true, then it was someone who was either part of the family or who knew the family very well. There is that potential, but even that aside, it's a really bizarre case.
So as she was walking off to go home, was it the grandfather that was watching her?
Well, this is there's not really this is the country, so there's not really someone watching her because these kind of things just don't happen. It was her uncle who passed her.
Oh, her uncle
carrying a ladder, and he purportedly is the last one who saw her that we know of.
But he's not indicated it in her disappearance.
What's weird is that in late October of this past year, her twin sister came out and made a public statement and said that she believes she knows who took Mary, and that it's someone that the family knows. She has not named the person, to my knowledge. The reports out of Ireland have been very sketchy, but they're a little bit different. They don't name suspects in the news or anything until there's some very defined, until an arrest has been made and so forth. So she's indicating that there was some kind of cover-up from the beginning with this, and there may be, maybe there's something to this that it is indeed a human crime. But I always look at areas like this and look at things that are disturbing or strange crimes in conjunction with other activity that's going on. And David's shaking his head because he knows what I'm talking about. There's another factor, to these areas of high strangeness, and it's that you often find bizarre crimes, or people who are engaging in strange practices. And, maybe that's a component here. The region in Donegal where this happened, it's known for sightings of the Fae. There are other strange encounters there. There have been UFO sightings. And there was actually a disappearance many years afterwards that was very similar. It was a college woman who was vacationing from the U.S., and she disappeared from the same region. Now, she turned up alive, but they found her in an empty house that they had searched previously. So it's another one of these incidents where, the authorities search the area, there's no sign, and then all of a sudden, it's just like she reappeared, just like she vanished, but in a completely different location. And similar to Claudette Sauchon, she was in sort of a muted state and wouldn't say anything and would never talk about what she had experienced or why she had disappeared. But again, no signs of sexual assault or anything like that. So that obviously was not not what was behind the crime.
Hey, Dave, let me ask you a question on that area. Maybe you can answer. Is there any certain ley lines or right in that general area as well?
Yeah.
I think there is, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, what kind of was that a Druid area or ancient, Celt area?
Yeah, pretty much. Most of Ireland, you can find those kind of practices, and in fact, Donegal is still kind of country in a lot of ways. So you can even find, modern people that are still adhering to a lot of those folk practices and traditions.
Okay, so why don't we go into some of the theories as to how this is happening? Now, what I just want to say that from what I read on these disappearances, that a lot of these locations, there's bushes of berries nearby. Also, these locations where especially the younger children are found are locations that are almost impossible. It's even tough for an adult without help to get into these high locations, and they're in higher elevation. And in the case of the Jared, how in the heck? And for one thing, why was that 3-year-old left alone? This whole thing doesn't sound strange on his case. It sounds strange to me, because who in their right mind would let a little 3-year-old just wander off? And they were with the Christian group. It was like, I don't know how many were in this group. And the sister, Jocelyn, why wasn't she watching her brother? And I don't know. It just doesn't sound right to me. And they had said that there's no way that this little boy could have gotten up that mountain by himself. But
was that where were there mountain lions in that area?
Yes, but they ruled that out.
Okay.
They did rule that out, and now, like his clothes weren't ripped. They were in pretty good condition. However, his shirt was not found. His shoes were almost like brand new. There was nothing, and they had been exposed to 4 years of elements of weather and snow and rain, but yet the shoes were like brand new. So this particular case, because I talked about it, is very strange, unless. I don't know, unless they were placed there not too long ago, because this was found 4 years later, and if these shoes were actually exposed, don't you think the insides would have been wet, and let alone the shoelaces? You know, the shoelaces didn't even. Let me see if I can find his shoe. Even the shoelaces weren't in bad condition at all for 4 years of rain and snow. So I don't understand this case here. And they also say that these kids, a lot of the kids have dogs with them, and I guess the dogs will come back, but yet the child won't. The child just disappears. And also I read that children have been found that also the clothes. Now, Dave, I think we talked about this. I told you about this. I read that they'll find the clothes of the child folded up and placed.
Yeah, what's really weird about a lot of those type of cases where the person disappears and they find the clothes, one thing I find strange about those type of cases is there's no footprints around any of the clothes or anything. There's no footprints of them where they walked away from where they were. It's almost as if something snatched them from the air.
Oh.
And a lot of those cases have those same attributes where it looks as if someone snatched them from the air and then their clothes are just dropped there neatly or whatever. And sometimes when they do find the bodies of these missing people, there's no foot tracks coming in or out either. It's almost like their bodies were dropped from the air. So I find that very, very compelling and weird too.
They usually, now it seems like that these children, they disappear in like rocky areas. So it would probably be pretty hard to get a footprint, don't you think, in a rocky mountainous area?
Yeah, but a good tracker is going to find signs of disturbance, one way or the other.
Yep.
And, you know, how large of a rock field are you talking about? At some point, you know, there has to be an entry point, and there has to be dirt. And, you know, you just widen that circle more and more, and you look for something. There's going to be some kind of sign. It's funny, Dave, talking about this, because we had a weird incident in Point Pleasant when we were investigating there, and found something that had these same type of indications, you know, that seemed like it had been dropped from the air, and we widened and widened the circle looking for tracks or sign of disturbance or something, and there was nothing.
Yeah, it was almost as if something did what it did and dropped it from the air. There was no incoming or outgoing drag marks, anything.
Nothing.
So, pretty wild stuff.
Well, I also read that the tracking dogs, a lot of times, a high percentage of these tracking dogs can't find the scent, or they simply refuse to do any more tracking. Now, what would cause that?
Because if there's no scent humans will leave a scent no matter what. And
right.
A good tracking dog will pick it up every single time. And that alludes to the same thing I was just talking about. It happened from the air.
And also, these disappearances, most of them occur in the afternoon. Not morning, not night, in the afternoon.
That could be anything. You know, most folks are they go out on their treks in the afternoon. So that could go either way, really.
Also, these searchers, they'll comb an area looking for the missing individual, and they'll go back. They'll comb that area maybe 100 times, and then they go back, and there's nothing there. But then they'll go back, and that's where they'll find some kind of remains or their clothes folded or something. But did I mention about the bright colored clothing?
No.
Okay. Now, according to what I read, they said that most of these children are wearing bright colored clothing when they disappear. And there's no shoes, and when they do find a child, the child has no shoes, and there's no scratches or bruises on their feet. And when they do find a child that is alive, they are quite traumatized, and they have a low-grade fever. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that there's so many possibilities for what we're dealing with here, and ultimately, I don't think there's any one specific answer that explains all of these disappearances. The case that Dave talked about at the beginning of the show with this hairy man being spotted, and a lot of people that are working on some of these missing persons cases domestically that have weird elements. There's sort of an unspoken indication that, well, maybe, some type of Sasquatch is responsible for this. And that makes a lot of people uncomfortable for a number of reasons. You got one segment of the, people who research Sasquatch who believe that these are peaceful animals that just want to be left alone and so forth. And, then you've got a whole other segment of them, but that don't quite accept these things are that intelligent to be abducting humans. Who can say? You go back to Native American stories, and there are a lot of Native American tales about Sasquatch-type creatures abducting members of the tribe, whether it's women or children or whatever, to, to keep their, population up, to, possibly women to breed with or whatever. And this all sounds like folklore or mythology, but again, you go back to the facts and you hear these stories from cultures all over the country. So you have to consider, okay, if it was happening then and these creatures still exist, what's the potential that it's happening now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was many stories of tribes in all-out war with Sasquatch.
Absolutely.
Over territory and stuff. So it always goes hand in hand with that.
Is that mostly like in the 1800s, Dave?
Well, it goes way back even before then. I mean, there's cave drawings of it, so, there's all kinds of stories of it.
So, well, what else do you think? Now, there's talk about Wendigo, and I think Wendigo is an American Indian legend. And in the Philippines, they talk about jinn or demons that are responsible for these abductions. Also, large birds and extraterrestrials, or going into another dimension, like Orion Williamson. He's walking across his farm, and all of a sudden, he disappears
in front of numerous people.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. There's, like he said, there's so many different ways you can go with it. Excuse me.
Bless you.
They another theory, another thing I have to mention while we're talking about this is I've done a lot of research on Satanists and Satanism. There is a lot of cases that have dealt with those types of folks kidnapping people for sacrifice. There's a lot of law enforcement records on it.
Particularly children.
Yes, but in particular children, because those are the most innocent of all of us, and that's what they need to use to gain power through sacrifices.
Well, why would they find their clothes folded in a certain area?
Each case is different. Every case is different, but there are a lot of missing children that have been attributed to Satanists doing sacrifices.
Oh my God.
And they won't leave any evidence if possible. And they do leave some, but it's been well documented for many, many years.
Would they go up into these high elevations, or?
Well, pertaining to that, who knows? But a lot of these missing children are attributed to that. And there's so many cases. There's literally hundreds of thousands of missing children in this country right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are. You look at the missing person stats, and you find a wide range of variation on what the different agencies and so forth will claim. You try to look on the internet and get really valid stats. It's hard to find. Some claims are up to 1 million people a year go missing. Now that you put that into context, that is 2,300 people a day that go missing.
Well,
now,
go ahead.
That sounds like a really big number, and you got to account for the fact that the bulk of those, and I'm sure Dave can probably speak on this more than I can, being law enforcement, but the bulk of these are solved because those initial stats include runaways, people who are trying to adults who are trying to get away from situations, missing children that later turn up. A lot of those cases are solved, but even considering that a percentage of those each year is not solved, the National Missing Persons Systems, if you look at that, it will tell you that there are, at any given time, there are around 90,000 missing people. 90,000. And that doesn't count, cold cases and people that have been written off and declared dead and so forth. And there's just so many of these weird cases, and only a percentage of them are happening in national parks. There are a lot of other cases that happen, right in well-trod areas, and some of them have some really bizarre aspects to the disappearance.
Well,
I'll give you some numbers on that real quick, Noreen, if you want.
Sure, yeah.
2012 NCIC statistics. Missing persons under the age of 18 and 497,327. Over 18, 164,266. In 2013, under 18 missing, 462,567, and over 18, 165,344. Now, they also, like David said, they break it down into all these categories. One I thought was interesting, under 21 in 2013 that were missing what they considered involuntarily, either being kidnapped, parental abduction, or whatever other means, 9,572.
Oh, my God.
Same category, 9,261. So, right there is a lot of people that they consider that were missing involuntarily via whatever means, kidnapping, they walked off and disappeared, or whatever the case may be. And that's not even counting all the cases that are not reported. There's a lot that are never reported.
We have a question from the chat room, F Warrior. Dave, why these satanic related disappearances aren't reported in the media or talked about by law enforcement?
They are somewhat, but it's one of those subjects that's kind of taboo. I did a lot of research on that a couple of years ago, and I actually did a show on it, and the numbers are staggering. I mean, I can't recall them off the top of my head, but just in a short amount of time, I found hundreds of articles of people that said they were actual victims of some of these cults, and they were being used as children. Some of them were adopted, and some were in foster care. And what these people were doing was they basically would have these children and use them for whatever they needed. Like they would have the whole coven come over and sexually assault these children, via gang rape or whatever. And then some of these kids were actually, their parents were in the cult and were letting the cult come over and do that to their own children.
And grandparents. Grandparents as well.
Everything. Yeah, the whole thing of it. And, it's just mind-blowing what's going on. And some of the numbers that I read worldwide, there's an estimated over 3 million people involved in these satanic cults. And that's worldwide. And just in the United States alone, it's over 1 million people. And that's just rough estimates they're saying. And it's
here's another factor to that, Dave, which I'm sure you're aware of too. I consulted with authorities for some time dealing with occult crimes, and one of the things that a lot of these police officers told me, they take me to these sites and or have me go over photographs and so forth. And one of the things that made it very difficult for them to deal with these cases is that there are actually a lot of very, shall we say, highly placed people who practice Satanism, and they don't want this kind of thing out in the media. Now, some of them are very public about it. There's a very high-ranking Pentagon official, and I'll let you guys go on and Google him and look at him. He is he was formerly involved with Anton LaVey, the Church of Satan, and he took off on his own and formed his own organization. But he's just one example, and I'm not saying that he has anything to do with any crimes on here, but he's just an example of the fact that people who engage in these practices are they're police officers, they're military personnel, they're judges, they're all across the spectrum, and it's sort of in their vested interest not to let this out too much in the media. And that's coming from police officers that told me that. They will say, look, we can't really talk about this in the media because it's kind of a taboo subject, like Dave was talking about.
Yep.
We also have another question from Charlie. Have any of these disappearances been on the ley line?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
Can you explain to the viewers who may not know what that is, what is a ley line?
Go ahead, David. That's your field. More than mine.
Ley lines, that's a pretty big topic there. In a nutshell, they're ancient trackways. And the folklore of these areas will tell you that they are lines of energy that run across the earth and connect certain holy points and sacred sites. And in the old beliefs, these track lines, these ley lines, could be utilized for a wide range of mystical and spiritual reasons. And, everything from ritual practice in a positive sense to practices in a negative sense. If you go to Europe, a lot of the stone circles, even a lot of the old churches and so forth, they're all built on ley lines. And the old pagan sites, the further back you go into the various cultures, you'll find that the pagan sites are on these ley lines too.
Yeah, they're geomagnetical as well too, right there.
They're geomagnetical too, yeah. And then, you find different variations of them. If you go to Asia, they practice what's called feng shui, and it's proper alignment in accordance with the energy of the earth, the ley lines, the dragon lines, and so forth. And it's all about following that geomagnetic energy so that you can navigate safely, essentially.
Can these ley lines be in parks?
They can be anywhere.
Oh, yeah. They're all over the whole entire earth. If you look at, you can find models of like the Earth grid of the ley lines that run across the earth, and you can look at a globe, and it's just lines running in every direction that crisscross all over the planet.
Okay, though, in the cases where these people disappear in front of your eyes, now, if a child, say a child is walking along with their parents and they're right, maybe what, 10, 15 feet, or not even 15 feet, maybe 5 feet behind them. Now, how can all of a sudden that child disappear and they're walking in the same location, in the same line?
I think that's a portal.
But okay, but why would that child go into the portal and not the parents? And they're right there.
It's like a doorway. You know, everybody can't fit through a doorway at once.
Or it could, or that particular portal could open and shut at varying times.
Exactly.
They could just walk right through it, and the child walks there, and bam, it's open, and it's gone. You know,
Exactly.
That's one theory on it.
Yeah, this is a big topic for me. This is something I've looked at for years and years, and I talk about it a little bit in my Strange Intruders book. But, you know, ancient cultures all over the world essentially talk about portals. Now, they use different language in accordance with their customs and beliefs, but, you know, all of these ancient traditions are talking about various doorways or things that open up that allow these other entities to come in or to exit. And I think that's what we're talking about in a lot of these situations, is that there's some kind of opening that is occurring, and some of these people are simply walking through and just, you know, we don't know what it's like there. I mean, science is just now finally admitted in the last few years that other dimensions actually exist. Well, as far as I'm concerned, ancient cultures have been talking about this for thousands of years.
Yep.
And, you know, science finally comes around and says, oh, okay, we've proven it. We don't know what's over there, but we've proven it. Well, what happens if one of us goes through one of those portals? You know, all the laws of the universe that we understand don't operate the same there. So who knows what kind of experience we can have? You know, maybe that's what happened to somebody like Claudette Sachant. I mean, this woman, you know, she vanishes. Mm-hmm. She turns up 438 kilometers. That's almost 300 miles away from where she had left. Now, she didn't walk that. You know, how'd she get there?
Yeah.
It's, you know, so we look at some really bizarre cases, and these cases you're pointing out where, you know, someone is walking a few feet ahead of another person and they just vanish. I think that's what we're looking at. I think we're looking at some type of portal.
Okay, so these portals, do they move, or the child got within inches of it and the parents weren't that close to it? So could somebody else come along and get into that same portal, or do these portals move, or do they come and do they go?
Well, I think it's like Dave is saying, you know, they can open and close in a heartbeat. And, you know, this is, I almost hesitate to use the word, but this is a science that we don't quite understand, obviously, at this point. And our science is just now starting to approach that with the idea that, hey, there are other dimensions. You know, they don't know how we get there or how things get out of it, but they've admitted that, and that's kind of the first step. So if we take that as a starting point and understand that ancient cultures talked about this, you know, most native tribes will talk about areas. They don't always use the word portal, but they'll have areas very often on their tribal lands that are taboo for a number of reasons. And they'll say, well, that's where the others live. Superstition Mountains. Noreen, you and I were talking about that before the show. And that's a perfect example, because the Superstition Mountains is a very taboo area for some of the native tribes in the region. And it's taboo because they say that, you guys will love this, that the reptilian king lives there.
Who says that?
And
Who says that?
You get into some of the tribal lore, and they talk about these doorways that'll open up in the mountains, and these things will come out. And the traditions of some of those native tribes say that it's taboo because it's their land, and if you go on that land, they have free reign to take you.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that one story, those kids walking in the cave, their footprints just stopped.
That's right.
Yeah. And they had massive search on for those kids.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
They tracked them all the way into the cave, footprints stopped, no sign of them.
Right.
Okay, now David, in the case of Claudette, where she showed up, and she was traumatized, and she won't even talk about it. Do you think that she can remember what happened to her, or is it all a blank to her, do you think?
It's hard to say. I mean, I've interviewed UFO abductees that have reached a similar state of trauma. They can remember bits and pieces, and they've sort of shut down otherwise, and they're just trying to block it out, whether from fear or trauma or whatnot. And I think, a lot of times we have to compare these things to people that have suffered crimes. And I know Dave can speak to this some, but, if you interview a person who has been physically assaulted, sometimes certain things will just shut down in their consciousness. They won't be able to deal with the memory and the realization of some of the things that have happened to them. So again, we don't know what existence is like in another dimension. We just don't. So who knows what that would do to us, how that would traumatize us going through something like that. And maybe that's what happened with somebody like Claudette. And, just the energy of these areas, sometimes according to native beliefs, is traumatizing. You look at the animals involved in the Claudette Sauchon case, I think that's very significant, because animals are much more sensitive to these things, and they respond accordingly. And you'll find that in a lot of these traumatizing situations, the animals will be traumatized. They won't act like their normal selves anymore after the experience.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be?
Look at the Travis Walton case.
That's a great example.
How he was so traumatized that what he was a part of and a victim to, it took him a long time to open up.
That's right.
That's an example of that right there.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't it be wonderful if somebody did go into another dimension, into these portals, and was able to come back and tell us about it? Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Oh, of course.
I mean, oh my God. I mean, that's like a movie, I would love to know. So,
but who knows what they experienced?
I know.
I think Dave and I are going to try to send a drone into one.
We got some cool stuff coming up in the near future.
Yeah, we do.
So I know, David, I had asked you if we could do another show on the Superstition Mountain, but you know what? Go ahead and tell us some more about that. And where is the Superstition Mountains located? I mean, I love this topic. So where are they located?
Superstition Mountains are in Arizona, and this is one of the weirdest places, Noreen, that I've ever been to. The mountain range is familiar to a lot of people. If you go on and Google the image, it has a pretty distinctive outline. This area is just to the east of Phoenix. So we're talking southern Arizona, high desert. It's probably most well known for being the location of the purported Lost Dutchman's gold mine.
Oh, yeah.
And that in itself is a huge legend that surrounds this area. And it actually sort of leads to a lot of disappearances and deaths. The legend of the Dutchman is that he was someone who had access to this vast vein of gold in the mountains and had only pulled a small portion out. He left a very cryptic map and some clues. And, ever since the 1800s, people have been searching for the location of the Dutchman's mine. And these guys are so, some of them are very radical in how they, quote, defend their territory. There's certain people down there who wouldn't hesitate to take a shot at you if they thought you were looking for gold or doing something in their, quote, area where they believe the mine is. So, that in itself has made it a very contentious area. But there are a lot of weird legends that surround the place, too. As I was talking about earlier, the Native Americans consider it a taboo area. And like I stated, there's a legend that the the reptilian king lived in the mountain, and that if you went on his territory, if you went on his land, he had free reign to take you, because the ancient agreement was that humans would stay away from their territory. And there are reports of doorways opening in the sides of the mountains and then vanishing. There are a large number of UFO sightings there, and we could go on a lot of different tangents with the whole Superstition Mountain Range, but just sticking to some of the disappearances, I've interviewed some people with some really weird cases, of people who have experienced missing time in the area, who have memories that they've uncovered of seeing some type of reptilian humanoids in the region, and there are strange disappearances there. There are it is a park. There are trails. People can go back and hike along around in the Superstitions, but there are disappearances there where, similar to what you're talking about, where someone will be walking, a few feet ahead, and suddenly they're just not there anymore. And
that goes on
in
the
hazardous terrain. It's full of rattlesnakes and rocky outcroppings, and a lot of things can happen. But there are a lot of cases that just the people don't turn up, or in some cases the body will turn up, or the bones will turn up, years later sometimes. And I spoke at length with a gentleman several years ago who was a former search and rescue in Arizona, and he told me, he said that anytime they got a call for someone missing in the Superstitions, they dreaded it because they knew they wouldn't find the person.
Oh.
Yeah. Some of the interesting things, too, about the Superstitions, like David said, some of the Apache tribes there believe it's the doorway to hell. And
that's right.
Some of the bodies that have turned up, that were missing there have turned up. They were totally disfigured, torn apart, with marks on them that weren't caused by any known creature in the area.
Yep.
Where there was strange deep gouges in the bones that couldn't have been caused by coyotes and whatnot. So, it gets its name from a good source, Superstition Mountains. I mean, the place is really crazy.
And there's other bizarre things. There have been a number of planes that have crashed into the Superstitions, and purportedly strange circumstances involved in the crash. There's a legend of a giant snake that supposedly lives in the Superstitions, within the mountain somewhere, and little people sightings. There's just it's one of those areas where there's such a wide range of phenomena, that it's really, again, it's a place that's very disturbing and very intriguing at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also designated a federal wilderness area, so it's owned by the government.
That's right.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't
Which
know
makes
that.
you think as well what's going on there.
Oh, my God. So what about this treasure? People are still trying to search for that treasure. I've seen a couple of shows on that.
Oh, yeah.
So, do you think they'll ever find it?
Well,
there's gold there. I mean, there is gold there, and it's in small numbers what they found in recent years. But what was that guy's name? Jacob somebody?
Jacob Waltz.
Yeah, discovered the mother lode there supposedly, and that's the guy who supposedly discovered a mother lode of gold there, and everyone's been searching for it since.
Yeah, he was a German miner, and he died. It was very late 1800s, like 1890, 1891, something like that, and he was. It's purportedly, like Dave was saying, he found this massive treasure trove of gold, and he actually did have a fair amount of gold with him, towards the end there, but he left very cryptic clues, and it's kind of like, what's more intriguing than a treasure hunt? And this thing is just so crazy. There are so many different clues and ways it could be interpreted, and it's led to people searching for that thing virtually since he passed away. Since like 1891, people have been hunting for the Lost Dutchman's gold mine, and there's gold that has come out of the mountains. There's Native American legends relating to huge amounts of gold that are in those mountains, but they also say that it's cursed.
Yeah.
So anybody trying to find it is kind of doomed. There was a show, Noreen, you're bringing this up. There was a show that was done last year about Superstition Mountains and about a group of the guys.
Mm-hmm.
Wayne Tuttle was one of them. Some of the guys who were searching for the Dutchman's mine, and just the whole crazy trail they were following, trying to find this thing. It's kind of like Oak Island. There's so many theories and different factors that have come into play with the thing, and over 100 years now, people are still searching for this thing, and still extremely protective of it.
Yeah, and you want to get real crazy with it, with all the talk of reptilian aliens and all of that, and gold. One of the theories with aliens and gold is they need gold because gold is the best metallic conductor of electricity there is.
Yeah.
So
That's right.
you want to tie that in, you can go that route with it as well.
Yeah.
If viewers, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat room, and we'll try and answer them. David, I know that you're into Bigfoot, and I have to ask you. I know this is kind of off our missing persons, but I want to ask you about Day at Love Pass.
Oh. I thought you were going to ask me if Bigfoot was missing.
Oh. No, somebody sent me a message. I actually, they didn't, I read in one of the comments that was sent that her husband worked for the Russians, and she no longer, they're no longer married, but her husband worked for the Russians, and they know for a fact there is a Russian Yeti, and they said that it was the Yeti that had gotten to these, this hairy man has got, are the ones that killed the, I guess 8 or 9 hikers that were out there on the Day at Love, on that pass. And in this Yeti, this ape man is extremely vicious. He doesn't want anybody in their territory, and if you do something that it doesn't like, it just like goes crazy. And so she said she knows for a fact that it was a Russian Yeti that had killed those hikers.
Yeah, that's probably one of the it's probably one of the main theories about that incident. The other one is that it was some kind of UFO related thing, or perhaps some kind of secret military operation that was taking place. But it's a really disturbing incident. For any, I won't go into the whole thing here because it's a long case. Happened in 1959. It was a group of hikers who were in the Ural Mountains of Russia, and something happened in this pass that caused this horrific death of all of these people. And there were a lot of aspects to it, like sleeping bags and tents, shredded up and
From the inside out.
Yeah, from the inside out, and it had so many weird elements. It's funny you bring this up because I just heard recently, apparently they're making a movie about this incident now.
Yeah, they are. I actually interviewed the producer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I had him on the show. I did it as a favor because they were raising money for this movie that they're going to make, and my show was entitled "Day at Love Pass: The Truth Must Be Told," and it's called The Circle. He's naming it The Circle, But
Right.
I'm not sure that they're going to do it historically. That's the thing about when people make movies. They want to make movies to get views, to get people to come to the movies. And I had asked him, I said, well, why aren't you doing it in a historic way? And he said, that's been done. They've done documentaries, and this is going to be in the movies. He said they'll kind of follow it, but I don't think they're going to. And that's what's going to hurt. That's what's going to hurt this case.
Yeah, that's a shame. That's a shame. There are a lot of, I've spoken to some Russian researchers, and there are an awful lot of Bigfoot type sightings in Russia and encounters. And there's a lot of people that believe that this is exactly what happened in this particular incident. It's one of those mysteries because we don't really know what happened with the group. We're talking about a group of, I think there were 10 of them.
No, there was the 10th, there was 9. The 10th one,
That went back.
He went, well, he said, he didn't feel good, so he went back and he didn't continue with them.
And that's what I was getting at is that all of those people, only one survived because he went back, and all we have is, what he has to say up to that point because the rest of them died on the way. Mm-hmm. And, it was they were doing like a cross-country ski trip, and, there's so many weird theories to explain this. I mean, I read some time back, somebody posted this whole theory that, it's just an avalanche. Well, an avalanche doesn't cause, tends to be torn up from the inside out. And all these other weird things that happen to these people. But, yeah, I mean, from how much I've researched, I haven't been to the site or anything, but from how much I've researched it and looking at other sightings and cases in that region, it sure seems to indicate some type of creature to me.
Yeah, me too.
What's one thing interesting about Russia too is roughly 15% of Russia is uninhabited, and another third is not productive as far as for people to live there, and that's a huge amount of land. And some of those places are so remote. There's probably never been any people in them.
Well, also, some of those locations have no animals in them either. The local tribe, there are some areas that they will not go into, and there's a name that they have for it, because there's nothing living. There's no animals, there's no hunting in those areas.
Yeah, now, some of the numbers are up to 50 to 55% of Russia is uninhabited. I mean, that's a huge amount of land.
That's a good spot. That's a good place for the Russian Yeti to hang out at.
Yeah, and all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, so do you have anything else you want to talk about on disappearances and vanishings?
No, I mean, I there's just so many ways you can run with it, as David and we said earlier. From Satanic Cults to Bigfoot to UFOs, you name it. I mean. And then, of course, you have the serial killers and the murderers and whatever the case may be, But what we like to focus on is those weird and strange ones that, like you showed, Noreen, the child's clothes folded up neatly. I mean, what would do something like that? That is just, there's got to be some kind of paranormal something associated with those types of cases.
Or like the girl, she walked 100 yards to take some more pictures by the river, and she completely disappears. No screams, no nothing, and all they find is the cap of her camera.
Yep. Yeah. So, that's why I do what I do, and why David does what he does. We're seeking answers to these types of questions. That's why we do this. He's been doing it 40 years. I've been doing it almost 30, and we're trying to find answers to some of these types of questions for people.
Royce is saying that there's a place on the highway near Superstition that truckers say they fear. People get possessed by driving past or over it. What do you know about that, David?
Yeah, that's I don't know which particular stop he's talking about, but there's the roads running all around the Superstition. A lot of people are actually afraid to even drive around there, particularly at night. Again, a lot of those highways running around there, a lot of disappearances, a lot of missing time, and so forth. So, Yeah, I mean, we could talk about the superstitions all night.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be going there this year.
Uh, yeah, and
hopefully we'll be coming back from there this year too.
Yeah, right. Well, we had talked about it, so you never know where we're going to show up.
That's right.
yeah, and Dave asked me about Bohemian Grove. I said, yeah, that's about an hour and a half from me, and I don't think we should be going over there.
You can't get in there, man. It's heavily guarded.
Oh God. Any other questions from the chat room? Anybody have the cat? The cat just took my boa. I was gonna wear my boa, and the cat took it.
They're saying, "Let's go all night, Noreen."
Oh, you want to go all night?
Charlie Canada.
Well, you know what? We have a half hour, another half hour. If you guys want to talk about something, anything else?
Can we? What do you want to talk about? You want to talk more cases, or you want to talk about what we're doing coming up, anything like that?
Oh, okay. Well, go ahead. Go ahead and tell us what's going on with you guys.
Go ahead, David.
We've been pretty busy already. Dave and I were in Point Pleasant, West Virginia recently, and most of you guys are going to recognize that place. The Mothman sightings, Mothman Prophecies movie is focused around that area. An area kind of like what we're talking about tonight. It's just a place of high strangeness, haunted sites, cryptid sightings, a wide range of weird experiences. And, Dave and I like to get kind of down in the trenches and really go into these places. People that have seen us live streaming from some of the locations, we love you guys tuning in. And let me tell you, you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg, because there's a lot more that we've done and that we have footage and documentation from. So we've got some stuff coming out this year related to that, and we already sort of have a master list for some of the things we're going to investigate this year.
Really, really cool stuff that's never been done before.
Yeah.
So stay tuned, keep watching.
We have a question from Kathy Salento. What is the story behind the American Indians saying it's a reptilian king that lives there? How did that come about?
Well, we don't really know. I mean, that's ancient tradition, and these tribes in the Southwest, they all have some similar legends about reptilian type of creatures, legends relating to giant snakes, and this goes, and this goes way back in their tribal lore, and if you ask, it's just the elders told them, and it goes. These are oral traditions, so it's not like we have any written record aside from some petroglyphs here and there. But a lot of these stories I've been told by elders, are legends of things that they knew existed from before their tribe. So the whether it came from the Anasazi or some of the other vanished tribes in the region, we don't really know. But I find it interesting that you do find a lot of consistency. I've spoken to Apache, Zuni, Hopi, Navajo, and you find differences because of the cultures, but you also find a lot of similarities too. So they're all saying the same thing, and to me, that's where there's smoke, there's fire.
That's how they pass on their folklore, is they hand it down generation to generation, and it's expected of them to tell it to the next generation.
Exactly.
It's just like with the Sasquatch. Virtually every tribe in North America has legends of these creatures, and they all have tribal names in their own language to identify it, but they're all talking about essentially the same creature, this large, bipedal, hairy man that lives in the wild. And like Dave mentioned earlier, there are a lot of cases where these tribes were at war with the hairy people, with the other tribes. And, there's some crazy stories out there that have been passed down year after year after year.
We have another question from Michelle Letchford. Noreen, my family drove around Superstition Mountains and came across a little ghost town. Is it just a tourist trap, or is there something more to that little town?
I don't know what she's talking about. Wickenburg?
I don't know. Michelle, do you know the name of the town? She didn't say the name of the town. They just that they came across this little ghost town.
It could be anything because that. I mean,
I know. I don't know how to answer that.
It goes back to the Spanish being there, guys. I mean,
Yeah, it does.
you know, all of those folks were looking for that gold, all the way back to the conquistador.
Yeah.
You know,
and the West is, guys. The West is full of ghost towns. I mean, some of them are, consist of one little building, and some of them, it's literally a whole town just sitting there that's abandoned. So, I don't know. If she wants to type in more information, I'd be glad to answer the question more thoroughly. But I know a lot of these ghost towns. I've been out in a lot of them, and they're very often they are haunted. There's often strange things that go on around them. A lot of them are gold or silver rush towns, so they have a lot of residual energy just because of that. I don't know. She remembers the name. Feel free to type it in.
Okay, we have another question from, Miles. He wanted to know if there's any strange disappearances in Dulce, New Mexico.
Dulce is a pretty weird area. I haven't heard of any recent disappearances there, but Dulce is a purported area of secret government activity. There's supposed to be an underground base there. There's a lot of tribal land. Oddly enough, there's tribal land that the tribe is not even allowed on or is hesitant to go on because of supposed government activity. And that's another big topic.
that's a whole story unto itself.
It sure is.
We have another question from Griffin. Do they know anything about the ghost town near me, Centralia? Now, I've always wanted to do a show on Centralia. That is fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love Centralia. That's not far from me either. If you don't know that story, folks, what happened there, long story in a nutshell, is that whole town underneath of it is coal mine. And a fire started there. I can't remember. I think it was in the 50s. But the fire is still burning today. And the whole town had to be evacuated because the fire got so hot from the coal burning that the streets were literally melting and sinkholes were opening up, swallowing people and swallowing their houses and everything. And the fire is still burning today.
Right.
So, it's a very interesting story. As far as it being haunted, I don't know. There was a movie made on it, based off of a video game that was the doorway to hell and all this stuff. But that's just Hollywood, doing their thing. But it's a very interesting place, and there's not many of the buildings left. They knocked most of them down.
Oh, because of the fires.
Yeah.
Most of the area is blocked off. You can't even get into it because it's so dangerous. And it was, Dave, I think it was 1962 when the fire started.
That's right.
It's actively burned since then, and some of the reports say that this could burn. It could be burned for decades still.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because it's just a slow burn of the coal. And who knows how much coal is down there. It's not running out of fuel. But it's a really bizarre place. It's funny. We were just talking about this location recently, and I've heard some reports that there are haunted sites in the area, but just about any town has some haunted sites in it. And given the tragedy of what happened, I mean, this is a whole community of people that got displaced because they all lost their homes and they literally lost their town because of this incident. So
it was small town USA, man. I mean, small town, everybody knew everyone. And the last people didn't even leave there till the early 90s or late 80s, something like that.
Something like that. And they were forced to, I believe, because of the government. A lot of the highways and stuff have been shut down.
Yep.
That's horrible. I just want to answer. Who took my mojo? Yes, Norio Hayakawa. If you look in my archives on my shows, in 2012, it was 2012 or 2011, I did air a show with Norio Hayakawa. It's a very interesting show. Okay, anything else? Oh,
That
turbinol.
Boyle listening
Oh,
in?
what about turbinol? There's supposed to be a monster in turbinol.
Chernobyl.
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 I love that. I love that movie, Diaries of Chernobyl. What's going on there? Any hauntings or anything that you know about that?
There's been several groups that have investigated there and gone there to in the areas they can go that aren't so high in radiation
Yeah.
that it'll kill you.
Well, you're looking at, again, another tragedy. And, purportedly there are some haunted areas within Chernobyl, but you also have the added, aspect here is all the radiation, and that's causing mutations. There's some strange animals that have come out of there that have been mutated. So, it's hard to say. I mean, people may be seeing strange creatures, but, is that a cryptid or is it a cryptid that's the result of mutation from radiation? Because, over time, life adapts. And while most life was wiped out in that region, some things survived, and some things that have wandered into the region and, adapted somehow to deal with the radiation and continue to live, they're going to look very different from what we're used to seeing.
Yeah. Any other questions? Anybody else have any questions? You guys have anything else you want to talk about? Anything strange, weird, monsters, anything? Love that.
Well, we could go on all night about that stuff. I mean,
Right.
That's what we do. So, we are at the end of the month. We will be doing some live investigating at the Rhodes Hotel. I'll go ahead and throw that out there. We're going to be up there doing a small event to benefit them and some folks that need clothes, like for a clothing drive. So we're going to be up there for 2 or 3 nights, I think. David's flying in. I'm going to pick him up. We're going to do our thing, with Jay Lynch will be there, the original Parasisters, and me and David. So it's going to be a good time. So make sure you tune in for that, too, on my channel.
Okay, well, since I have you now, David Weatherly can't see the chat room, but Dave, you want to help me and do some shout outs with for everybody? Everybody,
Sure.
Thank you again. Oh, wait a minute. Noreen, please ask what exactly reptilians feed on from humans. This is from F Warrior. Is it actually flesh, energy, or something else?
Go ahead, David.
Well, according to native legends, they actually feed on flesh.
Oh. Interesting.
But that's in relation to what we were talking about with the superstitions.
Yeah.
So, again, reptilians, that's a whole nother topic, and there's so many variations and different versions of what these things are. A lot of people think they're extraterrestrial in origin. But, there are reptilian legends that go pretty far back on this planet, and, in most cases they're seen as being pretty negative.
Now, David, have you ever been to Japan to the haunted forest?
Yes.
Oh, can you tell us about it?
You love plugging these things out there. A whole evening conversation for you.
Go give us a little bit. Have you now when you went?
This is an area. I'll say it in a nutshell. It's an incredibly haunted region, primarily because a lot of people go there to commit suicide. The suicide rate is very high in Japan. There is so much stress in the business world and the education system and everything else. And, there have been increasing numbers of people who just cannot deal with that mentally, emotionally, psychologically. And it sort of became this hip thing to go off to this forest and their lives. And it's a very disturbing place to go. It's unsettling because of the human factors. You go there and you can walk along this forest and you'll see discarded items. You see a pair of shoes. You'll see a note pinned to a tree that basically is someone saying goodbye to the loved ones because I've come here to end things and so forth. And they can't really control the region. I mean, the authorities have tried to monitor it somewhat, but it's it's a large forest, and people just slip off into it, and that's it. They don't come back out.
And also there's the Ure that haunts that forest. And if from what I did a show on the haunted forest, and if they find a body, the guards have to guard that body all night long until the next day, because if they don't guard it, that it won't rest in peace, and you'll hear the screaming and everything all night long from it.
That's right. That's right.
Really.
Yeah, but there's a lot of there's the forest is so big. Again, there's a lot of people that die there, and they're not found for some time.
Somebody had posted, and I just lost it, about Oklahoma. Do you know of any missing strange cases from Oklahoma that spike your interest?
I'm not thinking of any right at the moment. Oklahoma is a site, curiously enough, where there was a purported battle between a Native American tribe and a tribe of hairy people.
Yep.
So if you Google that for an evening's reading, you'll find some interesting things.
Okay, any other questions? Have any of them gone to the island of the dolls in Mexico? Have you ever done that, David?
Yes, I have.
No, my God. Where haven't you been? Well, tell us about the dolls. Tell us about the dolls. Tell us the story. How did this come about? That these are the dolls that are hung all over the trees?
Yeah, this was a caretaker who started going and living on the island, and in a nutshell, I actually wrote a very long article about this, Noreen, and I'll send to you. It was published in Phenomena magazine in the UK. But essentially what happened was there was a gentleman who was acting as a caretaker for this island, and he believed that there was the spirit of a young girl, a little girl haunting the island. So he, started buying her dolls, and it sort of became an obsession. Now, the Island of Dolls is not easy to get to. You have to go back through the canals. You have to hire a boat to take you back to this place. And, it's just this small little island that this guy basically spent his life collecting dolls and even pieces of dolls. And he would go into town periodically. We had to take a boat to do that. And he would travel into these other towns, and he would barter and trade for dolls and pieces of dolls, and he just covered the island in the daggone things. And at this point, they've been there so long that it's really surreal, because you can walk down a path, and there'll be the head of a doll that has roots from the trees growing around it and so forth, and pieces of dolls, and it's really weird. And you hear you can audibly just hear whisperings of voices. Oh. And you have the sense that what he did through trying to appease the spirit was, I believe, was just to attract more spirits there. And he was found in very strange circumstances. He was found, drowned, like I believe it was in a few feet of water. And so, a lot of the talk is that, the spirits took him, or they got angry with him or something. And it's a really weird location. Just visually, it's so surreal from all the doll pieces. And I know a lot of people are really creeped out by dolls, so that sort of adds to the imagery of it. And interesting, because the guy who took me back on the boat, he wouldn't get out. He wouldn't go on the island. And a lot of those people, they don't want anything to do with it. It's like, no, we'll drop you there, but that's it. We're not we're not going in there.
Do a lot of people visit that location?
I don't know how many people actually go to it. It was many years ago when I went there, and I think that it's been featured on a couple of programs, which probably drew more tourists to it. I think Destination Truth did it at some point, and I think somebody else went there. Was it Ghost Adventures? One or two of the shows have been there. So that's made it a little bit more well known, I suppose.
Wow. Any other questions? I got to put Kitty down because she won't leave me alone. Anybody else have any other questions? We're going to say goodnight if you don't have any more questions.
I will be investigating tomorrow night at a location too. I'm going to try to go live. It's right around the house here.
Oh, that'll be awesome. Yeah, so stay tuned. If Dave does his live show, I'll be posting so everybody can find out about it. Okay, so David Weatherly, thank you so much for coming on the show, and my buddy David Spinks. It's always a pleasure to have you guys on my show anytime. Now, David Weatherly, I have tons of stuff I want you to come on the show with. There isn't anything David Weatherly doesn't know, and I think he's been everywhere, all over this world. There isn't anything he can't talk about. But I am going to bring him back on the show to talk about his latest book, Strange Intruders. And I would also like him to touch on the Black-Eyed Children. It's I think 2011 or 2012. I aired a show with David on the Black-Eyed Children, and I'd like to refresh that video. And now, David, you also have another book coming out, don't you?
I've got several projects coming out this year, actually, and Dave and I are working on some things together. Just because we're so in sync with our style of investigation and so forth, so you're going to see us popping up some more. I've got a couple of books coming out this year. I've got a Sasquatch-related project, since I know you're interested in that, Noreen. Give me about a week or so, and you'll see things start to pop up online related to that. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. And Dave Spinks, what's going on with you, honey?
Well, like David said, me and him are working on a project. We're hoping to have it done here in, I don't know, probably a couple of months. If everything goes as planned, and it's a book, so I'll just put that out there. And then we have a lot of other stuff that we're working on together. We're going to be releasing several DVDs in the upcoming future of some of the stuff that was not aired live on our investigation. And some of it is just mind-blowing, the things that happened to us and what we experienced at these locations. So, we're gonna be putting that on DVD and in the books, and Dave's got his books coming out. We've got a lot of stuff going on, and a few surprises we're hoping, keeping fingers crossed, coming in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And a quick shout out, we've got a DVD coming out fairly soon with our good buddy Mike Ricksecker, who investigated with us at the Haunted Speakeasy, and hopefully you'll see him out in the field with us some more. Again, a great guy with a lot of experience, and gee, Dave and I were talking about it, and he pointed this out. He said, collectively, between the three of us, we have almost 100 years experience. I said, man, that makes me feel old. but no, this is what we do this full time, and we're constantly out in the field, and we love it. I personally can't get enough of it. I know David's the same way. So, some really cool things coming in 2016. It's going to be a big year.
Oh, awesome. Yep. Awesome. I wish you both much success. You know that. Okay, so everybody, I want to thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Hope you enjoyed the show. Would you please give the show a like? I'd appreciate it. For those of you who are new to the show, would you please subscribe? I'd appreciate that also. Don't forget, Dave Spinks as well has a YouTube channel. It's Country Roads Paranormal. He has some awesome videos.
You see David on there.
Yeah, and David Weatherly is with Dave as well. And Dave and David Weatherly are the two most experienced, and the way they investigate is awesome. They're extremely professional. Two of the best paranormal investigators I've watched. And everybody, so let's do. Listen, next week. Okay, next week my show. I didn't post the event yet, but it's this girl. She's been wanting to come on the show for the last year and a half or so. She wants to tell her story. She has an extremely haunted farmhouse, and I've agreed to have her on the show. It's possible it could be demonic related. And she also is going to talk about ghosts and sex. So I will put the event up. I will contact her one more time to make sure she does want to talk about this, and I'll make the event for next Thursday. It should be a very interesting show. I've heard her story. She's told me things. She's kept me up with on her story. It's very fascinating, and hopefully I can get her some help. Hopefully my buddy Dave Spinks can get her some help.
We're working on it. We're waiting to hear from her if she wants me and David there. So.
Yeah. All right, so everybody, Dave, help me do some shout outs. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, I'll run through.
Go ahead.
Bee Singer, Spooky Raven, Butterfly Kisses, Jamila Castile, Unique Annie, Wolful Today, Starry Night, Putty Tat, Unseen Scene, Chipper Terry, Alex Jean. If you want shout outs, guys, type it Griffin, Spooky Raven, Tiffany Twisted, Starry Night, Aaron Belt, Crystal Triplet, Indecent Angel.
And don't forget Trent and Royce, the mods
Royce
for tonight.
Yep. Janice Ball. I think I said Alex Jean already. I'm not sure. But.
Will for you today. Alex Jean is a new subscriber and a new watcher of the show. Welcome, Alex. Glenda. Did you get Glenda?
Nora Miles. No, I think I did Glenda.
Ginger Simmons.
Yeah.
Basinger 11. Basinger 11.
I got her. I got all the ones I'm seeing right now.
So we had over 100 we had over 100
Charlie Pineda. Who took my mojo?
Yeah, they're new too to the show. Margarita, Charlie. Hi, Charlie. Welcome back.
You guys are awesome. Thanks for hanging in the show tonight, and well, hopefully we'll see you soon on my channel too, as well.
And Spooky Raven, Spooky, I haven't been in the groove of the shows. I'm sorry. I took a time off, and I totally enjoyed my holidays. Now, Spooky Raven, she has a show on Tuesdays. Spooky, go ahead and yeah, anything but. I think it's anything but ordinary, and I will post for her shows on Tuesday nights. I also post on Google, and I'll post on my Facebook page for her. She has a talk show, very interesting.
Kathy Silento, hi Kathy. Christian Walker, there's a couple we missed. Dee Dee.
Christian Walker.
Yep.
So, Spooky, if you want to post your information for your show for the viewers. Go ahead, please.
All the folks that aren't in chat, we'd like to say thanks to you for watching as well. There's a bunch of you out there that aren't in the chat room.
Right. Yeah, we still have a lot of viewers still watching.
Yep.
Anything but ordinary with Spooky and Raven. Yes. Good show. Good talk show. All my friends, Putty and Unique Annie and Aaron and Chipper and Maria and Jamelia and everybody, Miles Dyson.
Miles Dyson.
Yeah, I think they're new. He's new too. Diane Hilbert. Oh, Diane. We didn't get Diane Hilbert. Glenda.
Oh, Diane. Yeah. Diane.
Okay, guys. Thanks again so much. And Putty Tat, thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the show. And don't forget, I'll see you next week for another interesting show of 2016 for a live broadcast on Do You Believe? Good night, David Weatherly and Dave Spinks. Thanks so much. Say good night.
Thanks for having me.